In today's market slot, we take a look at a new report that was commissioned by Standard Bank Wealth and Investment. The inaugural report lifts the lid on how Africa's wealthiest actually build their fortunes, turning what outsiders often view as risk into opportunity. Released earlier this month, the findings shift the narrative away from headline wealth figures to something far more revealing: the mindset that drives the continent's wealthiest. For more on this report, we're joined by Head of Wealth and Investment at Standard Bank, Jacques Els. A very good evening to you, Jacques. What an interesting report that you've put together. It is titled The Psyche of Africa's Wealthiest. Why was it important for you as Standard Bank to not just look at the figures, look at the numbers, which is what business and the economy is really about, but went deep inside to the actual psyche, to the producer of these numbers? Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Approximately a year and a half ago at Standard Bank Wealth and Investment, we embarked on a strategic repositioning of the business. We wanted to make sure we adequately position the business for the next sort of 5, 10, 15 years. And one of the things we decided to do at the time was to really get inside the head of our client. I think it's easy for banks in South Africa and across the world to often talk about they serve clients' needs or they want to address clients' wants and needs. We wanted to be absolutely sure that we in actual fact do that. So what we did is we spent a significant amount of time with many of our existing clients and their families across generations as well to understand what is really important to them. We also engaged with a number of individuals and ultra high net worth families in South Africa and Africa who are not currently clients of Standard Bank. So we embarked on this research journey to understand what really matters to our clients and potential clients. And that gave rise to the collaboration with Business Day and ultimately the publication of this report a few weeks ago.
And I'm quite interested in the response that you got from not only your clients, but other high net worth individuals as you approached them with this request. How did you position it? What did you say and how did they react?
They were firstly surprised because not often enough do people take time to really understand clients. We initially thought some clients might be a little bit apprehensive to really open up about what matters to them aside from the financial aspect of it. But we were pleasantly surprised, both by clients as well as non-clients, how interested and how open they were to actually talk to us. And I think given the sincerity of what we tried to achieve. So they were very, very open and keen to address
Right.
the topics.
So when we look at your report, it suggests that the continent's wealthiest individuals are predominantly first generation wealth. Creators. And this is very much in contrast with other developed markets or many developed markets where wealth is often inherited from one generation to another. What does this tell you specifically about the unique entrepreneurial spirit and perhaps the economic realities that are shaping wealth creation across the continent?
It really highlighted for us, I think, that the stark differences between old money and new money, or the old guard versus the new guard. In terms of old money or the old guard, there's a very strong sense of stewardship, wealth being transferred from one generation to the next generation. In terms of the new guard, it was absolutely a message of velocity. These are individuals that by design are restless. We found that the mindset really shifted from money, the mechanics of money, to actually wealth creation and leaving legacy. What we also found is in terms of the entrepreneurial mindset, it's a mindset to recycle capital back into the businesses. It's not a matter of just investing once and trying to reap the benefits. There's this constant reinvestment back into businesses. And I think most importantly, the spirit of a willingness to fail forward. And what we found in Africa in particular is the entrepreneurial mindset is one of inherent risk taking. These are not individuals and families who are averse to taking risk.
One of the interesting findings that the African report came up with is that African high net worth individuals often view wealth not as an end goal, but as a tool for security, for freedom, for continuity. How does this mindset influence the way that they invest, the way that they manage risk, and how they plan for future generations?
It's exactly that thinking that wealth provides optionality. It provides optionality where these families can live, where they can educate their kids, where they can invest some of their wealth. And I think what we also found is there's a very defined difference between building wealth and preserving wealth. In many of the first generation family creation journeys that we have mapped, it's still very much wealth building. As you move further down that wealth creation journey, wealth preservation becomes a lot more important. The one thing that was absolutely clear, whether it's first generation wealth or subsequent generational wealth preservation, is the absolute deliberate focus on the next generation. Now, the next generation could be children of school going age, it could be young adults, it could be middle aged adults. But there's an absolute deliberate focus on the next generation and preserving wealth, educating those, educating those members of the next generation. And what we found as well is that the role of family offices in Africa are becoming a lot more prevalent, where there's a very structured approach to building the wealth, to managing family dynamics, setting up family constitutions, getting the whole family or getting all family members to buy into the philosophy, how the family thinks about wealth, how they want to manage their wealth, and often how they want to give back to wider society and communities as well. And that really brings me to, I think, succession planning is the last point I would mention in terms of the next generational focus. It is incredibly important for entrepreneurs largely to make sure there's some form of succession plan in place to see continuity of the enterprise that they start.
Hmm. Now, the report also identifies three distinct wealth archetypes. There's the entrepreneur, the corporate grafter, as you call them, and the legacy steward. These are the phrases that you've put together. Which of these profiles is becoming increasingly prominent across the continent today? And what can aspiring business leaders and professionals learn from their approach to building wealth?
It is without a doubt the entrepreneur is the one archetype that we are seeing finds a foothold in Africa quicker, given the shifting dynamics in Africa, given the speed at which with which things change across Africa. And like I said earlier, in the case of entrepreneurs, I think two of the most important lessons is, first of all, the willingness to fail forward and speed of execution. We often say that entrepreneurs are driven by adrenaline. There are also lessons, I think, to be learned from the corporate grafters, for example. Corporate grafters really bring discipline as opposed to adrenaline. These corporate grafters often embody patience, perseverance, and for them, wealth is more architectural, built over a very long career. And last but by no means the least, as you mentioned, the legacy stewards. Legacy stewards really see wealth as a multi generational endowment and not as a personal balance sheet. And the legacy steward, for them, really, it's a matter of the long game, avoiding too much visibility and scrutiny, often staying below the radar to optimize their wealth from a continuity perspective.
Mm. Now, many people associate the continent with economic and market volatility, but your research suggests that some of the continent's wealthiest individuals have been able to turn uncertainty into opportunity. What are the key characteristics or behaviors that you would highlight that enable them to thrive in such environments?
I would boil it down to three things. And again, often go back to the entrepreneur archetype, which is where we've learned an incredible amount. The first is resilience. Volatility is a given in many markets, in many countries, in many geographies, and the resilience that we've seen from our clients. Secondly, is pragmatism. We have come across a number of clients who would start a business, try and make it work. If it doesn't work, they pivot either to a different line of business or they pivot strategically slightly. So the pragmatism is something that I think is absolutely necessary as well. And then what a lot of people might be surprised perhaps is humility and discretion. Our clients, we found, are really not, they are less concerned about the optics of wealth and they are more concerned about the mechanics of control over their businesses, over their own wealth, and over their own destiny ultimately. So it's less about the optics, it's less about luxury, but more humility and discretion.
Are there certain similarities that you found in entrepreneurs or the wealthy across the continent? And are there any distinct differences that you notice based on perhaps which country the entrepreneur is from, or the business person is from?
We really haven't come across, I would say, distinct differences. The distinct commonalities are around resilience. Clearly, in certain markets, there are certain sectors that lend themselves perhaps better to wealth creation. In countries like Ghana, mining, agriculture, telecoms, and construction play a big role. In markets like Nigeria, it is obviously the oil and gas sector. In markets like Kenya, the digital economy and the property sectors present great opportunities. But I think the overarching commonality lies in two things: resilience among the entrepreneurs and that very firm focus on the next generation. How do they how do they protect the wealth, and how do they craft a future for the subsequent generations?
I'm so interested, Jacques, in this next question that I'm going to ask you, because the history, the dynamics, and the policies of South Africa are markedly different for Black people. In comparison to the rest of the continent, we have had, as South Africa, the likes of, affirmative action and BEE. How has that impacted the mindset and the psyche of the uh, Black South African, millionaires or billionaires or that wealthy class?
I think the one thing that it has done, it has given rise to an absolute level of determination and motivation. And we've seen phenomenal success both in the entrepreneur archetype, but also what we call the corporate grafters in that respect. But I think given the perhaps historic imbalances, there's perhaps a much more marked level of determination and motivation to succeed. And often against notable odds, we see this on a daily basis. We see phenomenal successes
Mm.
in
And,
that
and
respect.
and what about the quote unquote tenderpreneurs who have now entered and become the wealthy class? How were they covered?
We don't have a huge amount of the entrepreneurs, and also there's another asset class or another class which we didn't pay too much attention to because we don't have a huge amount of clients in that space, and that is a number of clients have made significant amount of money in crypto assets. Simply because if you look at our client base, who we want to serve at the moment and who we do serve, the entrepreneurs are a very small portion of that, and so is the asset class that I refer to in terms of crypto assets. So the report and our efforts didn't go into huge amount of detail in those respects.
Jacques Els, thank you so much. If somebody wants to read this report in detail, where do they find it?
It is on the Business Day website, I believe.
Business Day website. There you go, Jacques Els. Thank you so much for your time and for taking us through this
Thank
really
you.
intriguing report.
You're
That's
welcome.
Head of Wealth and Investment at Standard Bank, Jacques Els, on the Standard Bank Wealth and Investment Report that has just been released. Actually, it was released a little bit earlier on this month, and it's titled "The Psyche of Africa's Wealthiest: Standard Bank Wealth and Investment Report 2026." Takes us to exactly 6:52 Central African time. In just a moment, a conversation with Madapiri.